All right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one, and I'm going to get straight to it. I got a good story for you guys today, and this one right here hits a little bit different. How many of these stories have you guys heard me talk about drugs, money, power, greed, corruption? And at the end of these stories, they always end the same way. Somebody gets stabbed, somebody gets sliced up, somebody gets butchered, somebody gets betrayed, because that's what's happening out there now. These stories are a dime a dozen. There's not a shortage of these stories because that's what goes on these main lines now. It's no longer about trying to do what's in the best interest for your people, trying to advance your people, trying to unify your people. It's not about that no more. Now it's about trying to get yourself in a position so that you can make money, so that you can take advantage of monetary gain before somebody either politics you out or you fall victim to cutthroat politics. That's what it's about now. When I say this story hits a little bit different, I say that because it hits a little bit different. This story right here lets you know how dangerous somebody can be. Somebody that's in a leadership position and they're basically running amok. The yard's all messed up. They're using dope. They're not enforcing policies. There's no order. There's no discipline. Everybody on the yard knows it's messed up because of the individual that's running the yard. But this guy also understands that he has to be proactive and take steps to ensure that nobody can get close enough to him to take him out his position, or that leaders above him can't hold him accountable for what he's doing on that yard. And that's why this story is different, because it shows you what somebody in a leadership position is capable of doing, that understands the dynamics of politics, that understand how politics work and what they need to do to ensure that nobody gets close enough to take them out. And what I mean by that is this: somebody that's in a leadership position that knows they're not running the yard the way it's supposed to be ran. They're having people blasted for all the wrong reasons. They're out there using dope. They're out there making money. So they don't care. They don't care about the consequences. Their way of thinking is, I'm just going to keep running this yard until the wheels fall out, until somebody takes me out of position. But until then, I'm going to implement policies and put things in place that will guarantee that nobody gets close enough to me to take me out of this position, that I'm well insulated on this yard. And when you think about it and you understand how these things work, you know that there's only a couple ways that can happen. One of those ways are by new guys that are hitting the yard. Guys that are hitting the yard that are bringing filters or that are bringing kites with them from leaders that basically give somebody instructions to take him out of that position because they know what's going on over there. Or higher ups above this individual that are trying to hold him accountable because people are getting hit over there that shouldn't get hit. All kind of things are happening over there on that yard that shouldn't be happening. Basically, a tyrant has taken over. A good leader understands that when you're out there in a leadership position and you're running a main line and you're overseeing your manpower, you know that these guys are going to break policy. There's going to be misconduct. Things are going to happen. You're dealing with different types of individuals. You got youngsters that don't know no better. You got other guys that are more prone to misconduct because that's just the way that they are. They need to be disciplined. You can't stab somebody every time they step out of line or do something wrong. You can't do that. That's what a tyrant does. And sooner or later, your own people are going to take you out. They're going to fear you. Somebody like that is reckless. And that's kind of what this story is about right here. It's also about somebody that's just a little bit more seasoned than, the next guy, and somebody that understands the things that they need to do in order to make sure that they're insulated and that nobody can take them out. So that's why this story is a little bit different. This individual ends up finding out that a green light was placed on him, but what he does next is crazy. It has a crazy twist to it that you just wouldn't expect. And one of the viewers, as long as I've been doing this YouTube channel, a viewer in the past actually asked me about a scenario like this, if it could ever happen. And this is the first time I've got a story where it did happen. So this story right here, it took place in Wasco State Prison, and it happened at around a time where much prior to this incident that I'm going to tell you guys about between the LA County Sureños and the Orange County Sureños. Probably because they felt like, you know what, if the other side takes control of the yard, we're going to end up getting the shitty end of the stick. We're going to end up getting politicked against. We're going to end up falling victim to favoritism and things like that. So, you know, LA County wanted to get somebody from LA County to run the yard, and Orange County wanted to get a Sureño from Orange County to run the yard so that they wouldn't fall victim to these things. And that incident, it actually ended up escalating and turned into a small melee, a 7-on-7. They went out to the yard and went hands-on. Weapons came out and they did their thing. So there was a lot of Sureños that were still on the yard at the time this incident took place, and they still had a bad taste in their mouth. The tension was still thick out there. Now, I don't know how this individual got put in the leadership position. I don't know who placed him in that position or how he took over, but there was an individual by the name of Bam Bam from 41st Street that was running the yard at this time. And this was after the incident where there was a 7-on-7. So everything I heard about Bam Bam was all bad. Him and his entire leadership, his mesa, they were all corrupt. Nobody was enforcing policies out there. Everybody was getting loaded. Every time you had, you know, a Sureño that stepped out of line or did something wrong, he was having them blasted. Blast them, cut them up, slice them, get them up, get them off the yard. And you can't do that. These were good, solid Sureños that were loyal. Dudes that probably should have been disciplined, probably should have been given some burpees or reprimanded. But instead, he was having these guys cut up, stabbed, and taken off the yard. So because of the way Bam Bam was running the yard, and because that incident that had happened months prior was still thick in the air, there was still a power struggle going on between the Sureños from LA County and the Sureños from Orange County. And although there was a general consensus across the board, everybody wanted to get Bam Bam out of position because they knew he was bad for the yard. Orange County was pushing the issue, and rightfully so, because they wanted to get somebody from Orange County in that position. You know, until I started doing these stories, I didn't know that there was this conflict between LA County and Orange County, and that these guys were always out there on these yards competing to take control of the yard. I never knew about this rivalry that they had between each other until I started doing these stories right here. But, you know, you guys know I've ran multiple stories that have talked about LA County and Orange County going at it before in the past. I've ran multiple stories on this conflict myself that highlighted this conflict. And on several of these occasions, it also escalated into full-blown melees where Sureños from both of these counties have fought on the yards. In fact, Wasco ended up being like ground zero for multiple incidents that would take place between these two counties. And all these incidents, they stemmed from this same power struggle. But the last time that these guys got into it, it ended up resulting in a Sureño by the name of Tweety from Mecca getting killed. The last time these two cars had an incident, Tweety was fatally shot by one of the gun towers and died in a pool of his own blood. And then months later, this other incident took place. But this particular incident has a spin to it that you don't hear about happening too often. So Bam Bam's out there, he's running amok, the yard's all messed up, nobody's enforcing policies, he's getting loaded, he's always in his cell. The yard's just, it's all messed up. There's no unity out there. Everybody's separated. These two cars, LA County's on one side of the yard, Orange County's on the other side of the yard. Nobody's respecting the policies. They're staying up at night, disrespecting, you know, the other groups. There's no order. There's no structure. The program's all messed up, and everybody knows it. So my source, who I'm not going to refer to as Shotgun, you know, he told me that basically the homies in the back, they wanted Bam Bam removed from his position, and they wanted somebody to replace him immediately. They were campaigning to get him out of position because they were hearing about the things that were happening out there on the yard. The term, the homies in the back, is a reference that's often used to refer to the leaders or leadership that are housed in the hole. And this is a common term that's used across the board. So apparently leadership that was locked up in the hole were hearing about everything that was happening on that yard. I mean, they're right there. So anybody that gets locked up, anybody that ends up getting caught with a weapon or, you know, gets caught up for a physical altercation or whatever, anybody that goes to ADSEG are going to end up back there where everybody else is at. And they're going to report these things. They're going to let them know what's happening out there on the yard. So these guys end up hearing about everything that's happening out there. There's good sureños being hit. There's no money being generated on this yard. Everybody's out there getting loaded. They're running them up. So Shotgun said that, when he landed on this yard, he was approached by an individual named Bebito from White Fence that he was with in the reception center. And Bebito basically gave him a rundown on the yard. When you land on a yard like this and you're new out there on the yard, somebody's gonna get at you. Somebody's gonna get at you and they're gonna lace you up. And they're gonna tell you, hey, this is how the program is out here on the yard. This is where we kick it right here. These are our benches, these are our phones, these are our handball courts. This is our area over here. This is where the Africanos kick it. This is where the Woods kick it. They're going to give them the rundown of the entire yard, and they're going to let them know about a little bit about what's going on out there. And that's what Bebito did. After he went over the schematics of the yard with Shotgun, then he told him, he's like, hey, bro, he's like, I don't know what you've been hearing. I don't even know if you're aware of it, but this guy that's running this yard, Bam Bam from 41st Street, he's on his way out the door. He's on borrowed time. And I'm letting you know right now, when we get Palabra to take him out, I'm taking this yard over. And when that happens, I want you to take more of a proactive role within my leadership circle. I'm going to embrace you as somebody within my circle. So Shotgun was like, you know what, it's all good. I'm just here to assist. Shotgun wasn't really the type of individual that got involved in politics. Besides that, he was a first turner. He was still learning, and he wasn't somebody that was part of these leadership circles. He was just a young Sureño at that time that was still learning, and he was there to assist whenever he was asked to assist. So the whole yard pretty much knew that Bam Bam was on borrowed time. And they were just basically waiting for word to come down. Everybody on that yard wasn't green. You had a lot of individuals that had been part of leadership circles in other prisons. So there was a lot of seasoned Sureños out there that understood how politics worked. They knew that, somebody like Bam Bam wasn't going to last that long. Not the way that he was running the yard. I say that because of what Bebito told Shotgun. It was obvious that they had communicated with somebody, or that leadership was in the process of, giving them that green light. So according to Shotgun, there was a Sureño that came out of the hole, and he had a kite with him, and he had specific directives to get that kite to Blackie from Playboys. It wasn't to go to nobody else but Blackie. That kite was supposed to touch his hands and nobody else's. And this was something that was stipulated by whoever passed that kite on to this youngster in the hole. And the Sureño that came out of the hole with the kite, he indicated that he had specific instructions to hand deliver this kite to Blackie, and that there were no exceptions to this directive. Coincidentally, Blackie just so happened to be Bam Bam's right-hand man. Not only that, but they were also cellies. Blackie from Playboys. And, obviously I don't know Blackie, but common sense tells me that Blackie must have been somebody that they trusted. He must have been somebody that had a little bit of influence for them to reach out directly and specifically to Blackie. That tells me that they had confidence in him, and that they knew he was somebody that would make sure that this would get done. So like I said, Blackie and Bam Bam were always together. They were cellies, and Blackie was part of Bam Bam's inner circle. He was part of his mesa. Obviously, Bam Bam knew that eventually leaders above him were going to gun for him. They were going to try to knock him off his block and take his position because of everything that he was doing out there. But again, Bam Bam didn't care. He's out there getting loaded. He's making money, and he's going to run with this and make it last for as long as he can. This is what I was talking about when I said that, somebody like that knows that they're eventually going to get taken out of their position. They implement safeguards or policies that will keep them insulated. Some of those things that Bam Bam was doing included any new Sureño that came to the yard, whether they were a shoe kick out or somebody that was coming out of the hole, or even a new arrival. He was one of the first ones to initiate contact with those Sureños. Because one of the things that he would do when they hit the yard, he would tell them specifically himself, if you have any contraband, whether it's clavo, whether it's kites, whatever it is, there is an immediate surrender policy out here on this yard. You are to turn any contraband over to me immediately. If you do not comply with these policies, you're going to get removed. There's politics going on this yard. There's things happening out here that we need to stay on top of. So we have a surrender policy that's in effect. And the whole purpose why Bam Bam was doing that is because he knew that he had to stay on top of that. if he allowed somebody to come out of the hole and he wasn't the first one to make contact with those individuals, or he wasn't the one to intercept those kites that might be coming out of the hole, then he understood that he was leaving himself wide open, because somebody coming out of the hole with a kite like that, if that kite made its way to the wrong hands and it was a directive to have him hit and taken out of his position, and that's obviously what would have happened. So this surrender policy, this immediate surrender policy of any contraband, any clavo, it was self-serving. He was doing that to protect himself, to make sure that he stayed well insulated. You know, and you really can't blame this young Sureño. He might have been a first termer. This might have been his first time, out there to a yard like this. He's never been exposed to these kind of politics. So you can't really hold him accountable for deviating. Despite the fact that you have a Sureño coming out of the hole who has specific directives to hand deliver this kite to Blackie, unless this guy's seasoned and knows better, he might feel obligated to comply with the policies that Bam Bam was telling him about. Otherwise, he felt like, he was being threatened, that he was going to end up getting hit out there if he didn't comply with these policies. So he admits that he has a kite, and Bam Bam takes him back to one of the buildings, and he has him drop the kite. This guy has the kite keistered, and he goes in the cell, he drops the kite, unwrapped it, and then gives it to Bam Bam. So that's where things ended up, falling wayside. This guy didn't know better. Technically in a situation like this, the Sureño that came out of the hole with the kite, he wasn't supposed to say nothing to nobody. This was considered like a special assignment, a special directive that was coming from leadership that has more status than the llavero on that yard. He was supposed to take that kite out there to the yard, and he was supposed to follow those directives to the T. He was supposed to locate Blackie and give that kite to Blackie himself personally. And, he shouldn't have done nothing else. He shouldn't have told anybody else that he had that kite. He shouldn't have relinquished it and given it to anybody else. When Bam Bam approached him about, surrendering any contraband that he had, he should have told Bam Bam right there, I don't have any contraband. I don't have any messages. I don't have no clavo. I just got kicked out. Classification kicked me out, and, I don't have nothing. But because this Sureño didn't do that, I'm assuming that he was a youngster that didn't know better. He had never been put in a situation like this before. And the fact that he felt threatened himself, that, he could possibly get hit for, not complying with what Bam Bam told him, that's where, things kind of fell apart. But at the same time, this falls back on, leadership. The individual that actually gave this kite to that youngster and told him to take this out there and to hand deliver it to Blackie. Whoever that was should have been more proactive in explaining this to him, to make sure that this kite didn't run any risk of getting fumbled and falling into the wrong hands. I would have told him, check it out, bro. This kite goes directly to Blackie from Playboys. You are to find him, pull him over, and hand deliver this to him directly. I would have also told him, don't report this to anyone else out there. Don't give it to anyone else offering to pass it on to him or anything else like that. This goes directly to him, period. Because, these guys as leaders, I'm sure they've been around, the guys that were back there in the hole. When, I've been in situations like that myself. And whenever I've told somebody to hand deliver a kite like that to somebody on the yard, because there was somebody out there that needed to go, there was always the possibility of somebody out there on that yard politicking against that kite, or, somebody else that might have been rogue that was part of the leadership out there that might have been, what, we appreciate you, passing this information on, but we'll take responsibility for it. At the end of the day, that's not what's going to happen. You're going to end up being the one that's going to be held accountable for this not getting done, because you were given specific directives and you deviated. These guys are saying they'll take responsibility for it, not to worry about it. They'll touch base with these guys in the hole, but you're the one that is going to end up falling back on. Especially when you were given specific directives and it was made very clear to you that you're not to give this to anybody else. So those are basic politics. Everybody understands, that's been in a position like that, that when you send a kite out there calling for somebody's removal, that it has to go to somebody specific, somebody that you have confidence in. because 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a lot of individuals out there that are going to politic against it, or they're going to try to stop it, or something like this is going to happen with what happened in this situation with Bam Bam. Bottom line is you got some crafty dudes, and guys, when they understand that they're on their way out and they're paranoid out there, they know that it's just a matter of time before somebody gets sent at them. They're thinking out the box. They're thinking out the box every which way possible they can to protect themselves. And somebody like that that's dirty, they're going to do anything and everything they can to make sure that nobody gets the drop on them. Anybody that's considered a threat, they're going to have them taken off the yard. They're going to have them whacked. Anybody that they feel might not be, with their agenda or might be undermining their authority, they're going to have them whacked and taken out because they pose a threat. So Bam Bam, he apparently understood the dynamics of the situation that he was in. And that's why he implemented this immediate surrender policy. And for the most part, at least in that situation, it worked. And according to Shotgun, Bam Bam bombarded anybody that came out to the yard. Anybody knew. When buses would pull up, new sureños, either him or somebody that was within his inner circle would pull those individuals aside, and they would be the first ones to make contact with them out there on the yard. And that's when they would hit him with this, immediate surrender policy. So this is what ends up happening. So like I said, the sureño that comes out the hole, he surrenders the kite to Bam Bam. Now, Bam Bam takes this kite and he goes back to his building. He goes to his cell and then he reads the kite. The sureño that fumbled the ball and who gave that kite to Bam Bam, big mistake. The kite authorized Bam Bam's removal and it was addressed to Blackie, his boy, his road dog, his right-hand man. The other thing that Shotgun said about Bam Bam is that he was always paranoid, whether it was because he was worried about, what he knew was coming or because all the drugs he was using out there. One of the things that he did say is that this dude was paranoid. It was almost like he knew something was going to happen and he was waiting for it. And it was probably because he was anticipating interference coming from the back and that he knew sooner or later somebody was going to slip through or somebody was going to get word to take him out. Anytime you're dealing with a situation where you're trying to unseat somebody, take them out of position, remove them from a leadership position on a yard like this, it's always a complicated thing. The politics can get shitty, especially when you're dealing with somebody that's liked out there, especially when you're dealing with somebody that has a lot of influence. Because then you got to not only deal with that individual that you're stripping or taking out of position, but you also got to deal with everybody else. I told you guys about that situation that I went through in Corcoran where I had to strip Carlitos from San Jose, and it got complicated. I had to deal with a lot of the other NF members over there that wanted him in position. He had been in position for almost 10 or 15 years, something like that. Carlitos had a long run over there. And, me going over there, having to take him out of position, I was catching a lot of pushback from a lot of the other NF members that felt like, I was overstepping my boundaries, coming into that household, trying to strip this brother, out of the RC position. So it can get real complicated. There's certain ways that you got to do it. When you're dealing with somebody that's still good and you're just trying to strip them or take them out of that position, you're not trying to hit them. It can still get complicated because you don't want to just go in there and make them feel like you're just shitting on them. There's a way to go about it. You got to finesse it where they don't feel disrespected or they don't feel, that like you're pressing them. But when you're dealing with the tyrant, that comes with a whole set of a different kind of circumstances as well. This story right here is a good example of it. So Bam Bam takes this kite back to his cell and he reads the kite and he basically sees that leadership in the hole are calling for his removal. They don't want him to just step down. They want him hit and they want him replaced immediately. I'm not sure if, their leadership that was in the hole understood or knew that Blackie and Bam Bam were cellies, but that's another situation in itself. I've seen it happen time and time again. You get two cellies that are together and during the time that they're cellies, they forge a bond between each other. They end up becoming close. And sometimes the loyalty that they invest in each other it goes beyond, their obligations, the things that they're expected to uphold as far as, being a sureño or being a part of an organization or something like that. And a lot of the times when, a directive will be sent to one celly telling him to remove his celly, a lot of times what will end up happening is these guys will end up being so close that the one that gets the kite will end up telling the other one, and they both end up locking it up. That's just a chance that you have to take. A lot of the times you'll get somebody that will honor their responsibilities. They'll take flight on their celly, regardless to how close they are. During the time that they were cellies, this guy might be riding this guy's sister, or, they might have their families out there on the streets linking up, with each other. So they're tied in. And all of a sudden now you get a directive and they're telling you, remove your celly. Your celly's got to go. His time's up. And, a lot of guys, they'll do it. They'll honor that directive and they'll take flight on their celly regardless to how close they got, because they understand that it's either him or me or both of us. So anyways, Bam Bam sees his name on this kite, and I'm sure this came as a punch in the gut. But what he does next is some cold shit. He doctors the kite. He takes his name off of that kite and he puts Blackie's name in there. Why he decided to do that, who knows? Only he knows. Maybe he felt some kind of way just based on the fact that they were reaching out to Blackie and that he was now a threat. Norteños have different policies when it comes to green lights and the removal policies. But from what I've gathered, sureños are required to put another pair of eyes on any kind of kites that authorize green lights. Kites that are coming out of the hole like this, not only to cover their asses, but to also act as proof that a green light was actually given. So when a green light comes out of the hole and it goes directly to somebody, I guess what they're supposed to do at that point is to take that kite to another sureño that they feel confident in, another sureño that has a little bit of influence out there, and they're supposed to show him that kite, allow him to read it and put his eyes on it so that he can confirm and validate that there was a kite that authorized this green light on such and such. And this is a way to cover his ass. So if it ever comes up later that nobody authorized no green light to hit this dude, nobody sent a kite out there like that, you have proof that it did happen. But if you really think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because, what if somebody doctored the whole kite? What if somebody just struck up a kite like that, about somebody else's removal and then showed it to another sureño out there as proof, instead of just, changing the name? What if somebody wrote a whole kite calling for somebody's removal and then showed it to somebody else out there as proof that a green light was given? It's still going to be honored. So Bam Bam plays this to a T. He follows protocol by showing this kite to some of the other sureños out there who had some influence on the yard. He shows it to them and they clearly see that Blackie from Playboys was green lighted and that they want this done ASAP. So the other sureños out there on the yard, they have no reason to question the legitimacy of this kite or the directives, even though they know that, Bam Bam's doing some foul shit. Nobody had the sense of mind to question, the legitimacy of this kite, even though a lot of sureños out there were like, why is Blackie getting hit? Bam Bam's the one fucking up. Why are they having Blackie whacked? That's a good solid sureño. He's not the one making all the bad calls. Bam Bam's the one that should be getting removed. So I'm sure they were probably surprised and they probably didn't understand the reasons for it. But at the end of the day, everybody knows that prison politics are cutthroat and that 9 times out of 10, you're not going to understand it either way it goes. Green lights come out on individuals all the time. Whether it's a good call, whether it's cutthroat politics, it doesn't matter. A lot of the times green lights will be authorized and nobody will even give it a second thought. Just know that the game is dirty. It doesn't involve me. So, all I can do is just keep it pushing. So at that point, Bam Bam, he starts putting the wheels in motion to have Blackie removed. And Shotgun, he obviously doesn't know what's going on at that point, but he knows something is brewing because there's a break in monotony. When things like this are happening, when somebody gets a green light put on them, or when, something's about to kick off between two groups out there, regular routines are broken. People start moving different, and you can just pick up on the subtle changes. You learn about You learn how to develop a keen eye for these types of things in prison. It becomes second nature. And these are the types of things that your survival depends on. So Shotgun, he knows that something is obviously happening. He can just tell by, the movement on the yard and just things that he's seeing out there. He knows something's going on. So the next time they come out for chow, Shotgun comes out his cell and he looks over at Bam Bam's cell and he sees Evil from Linwood and Scrappy from Santana at Bam Bam's door. And they're both talking to Bam Bam on his door. And this in itself isn't what cued Shotgun that something was going on. That's completely normal because both Evil and Scrappy were part of Bam Bam's inner circle. Just the fact that they were at his door wasn't cause for suspicion, but it was the demeanor. It was the vibe of the conversation that they were having. And it was just their body language that cued him in and let him know that something was going on and that these two individuals were more than likely involved. So Shotgun, he sees the tempo of the conversation between Bam Bam, Evil, and Scrappy, and his spider senses start tingling. He knows something's gonna pop off out here. What, when, where, how, who's involved, I don't know. Something is definitely happening. So at the time when all this was taking place, they had just come off a lockdown because that other incident that I told you guys that had happened prior to this had just happened. So they came off lockdown and, there wasn't no program being ran at that time. Everything was kind of still dead. Anybody that's been to prison, knows that after a lockdown, everything's kind of dead. It takes a while for programs to start up again and for people to get back into their regular routines. So the yard was dead. There wasn't a lot of people out there. People were trying to play catch up, and that's what was happening out there. The only thing that was happening at that time was First Draw Canteen. The yard was literally dead out there. There wasn't that many people out there. Shotgun said that, there was a couple of officers who were standing in front of the program office, but as far as inmates, there wasn't that many. Blackie and a few other Sureños were out there in line waiting to be called for canteen themselves, but other than that, that was it. And nothing about that seemed suspicious. The only reason Shotgun was even out there on the yard himself is because he was also going to canteen and they had just called his number. So Shotgun says as he was standing there in line looking around, he noticed that both Evil and Scrappy came walking up and that he could just tell they were up to something because of the way they were moving. You can tell when somebody's getting ready to take flight on somebody. I don't care how tough somebody thinks they are, how callous they are, how many hits they've done in the past. You always get that same sick feeling in the pit of your stomach. There's a level of nervousness. You get that queasy feeling in your stomach because that's your body reacting. There's a little bit of fear, and fear is okay. Fear is a good thing because fear keeps you on your toes and senses start peaking. This is what makes you look around and be, aware of your surroundings. So I'm sure that's what they were both feeling. You're trying to get themselves pumped up and they keep looking around, looking up at the tower, then looking around to see what everyone else is doing, looking to see where the COs are at, looking at their target, checking out their surroundings. That's what you do. And you're standing there and you're trying to calculate the best time to do this. When is the target, at its most vulnerable time? They're trying to play on the element of surprise. Maybe when the tower turns his back and he's doing something, he's not watching. Because the objective is to always get away. You're not always going to get away, but that's the objective. And the other thing he said is that Evil and Scrappy, they weren't standing in line waiting for canteen. They were just kind of standing to the side, which kind of, it threw them off. And, they kind of gave themselves up. They tipped their own hands because why else would they be standing there if they're not going to canteen? So they were up to no good. And Shotgun said he definitely knew they were about to do something. So Shotgun said, he's standing there waiting to go to canteen and he's keeping an eye on these individuals himself. Every now and again, he's turning his head and, he's got them in his peripheral so that he can see where they're at and what they're doing. And he said, when he was standing there, he turned to his left and out the side of his eye, he could see both of them rush in. They rushed in on Blackie. Blackie had his back turned and both of these guys just started going in on him. They started stabbing him. So he turns all the way around and he sees that they're stabbing him. They're hitting him. At first he thought They were just bombing on him. But then he seen how they were making stabbing motions, and then he seen blood. So Shotgun said that, when they first got him, he had his back turned and he was caught completely off guard. It's like he stood there for a minute trying to register what was happening, but then when he realized what was happening, he just balled up. Shotgun said that he remembered looking over at the COs to see how they were going to react because they were so close. They were literally standing right in front of the watch office. They were literally standing right in front of the watch office, and it was probably like 40 feet away. So they were right there. They were close by. And even though, it's always the objective to get away, to hit your target, to fumble your weapon, and to try to get away, sometimes that just might not be possible. And this was one of those situations. There's no doubt that they were going to get caught for this. These COs are posted up right there. They're like 40 feet away. Even though you're going to get caught, when you're given a directive like this, you got to follow through with that directive. So it didn't really matter that the COs were standing there. I'm sure they would have liked to have gotten away, but I'm sure they both knew that that wasn't going to happen. So Shotgun said that, when he looked at these COs, it looked like they seen a deer in the headlights. They looked and it was almost like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. And for a brief minute, they hesitated. And then when they realized what was happening, that's when they started running towards Evil, Scrappy, and Blackie. By this time, the tower also realized what was happening, and he hit an alarm. So you got these two COs that are spraying these guys, but they're not getting down. They continued to keep stabbing Blackie. They were trying to hurt that fool, according to what Shotgun said. And both of them had pieces that were made from the lockers, and those are nasty pieces. Those are the kind of pieces that, if they're made right, those are kill shots. Every time you hit somebody with those, if they got those little diamond tip points on them, it's going to be a bad day for somebody. When they started spraying Evil and Scrappy, it had little or no effect on them. They continued to just, they kept turning their heads trying to get away from the spray, but they still kept on going in on Blackie until these COs pulled out their batons and started hitting them. That's when they finally got down. But before they got down, both of them turned and threw their weapons as far as they could. Their weapons, they ended up landing in the yard, just somewhere in the field. It's not like they went up on a roof or over a fence or something like that. And even though I'm sure they knew they were still going to get caught, you still got to try. At this point, the whole yard goes down. And Shotgun said he looks over at Blackie and he's leaking everywhere. They hit him in the neck, the face, the head, the torso. They both hit him about 7-8 times each. So they got him good. Shotgun said that when everybody was laid out on the ground, that's when he heard Blackie yell over to Evil and Scrappy. He's like, "What did I do? Like, what did I do?" He kept on asking him, "What did I do?" And at first, neither one of them said anything. But eventually, I believe he said it was Evil. Evil said, "Hey, it was just business, bro. It was just business." Anyways, until everybody got the details of what really happened, everybody was kind of confused as to why Blackie was the one getting hit when Bam Bam was the one messing up. So Shotgun said that everybody was wondering what happened, but nobody knew. Then a couple days goes by, and after they get off lockdown, word starts going around that that was a bad call, that Blackie wasn't supposed to be the one to get hit. But Bam Bam was still there. He was still on the yard at this point. And that was a bold move, that Bam Bam was still there. That's when I would have thought he would have known that, okay, you know what? Now my time is definitely near. I need to go ahead and figure out my exit strategy and get the hell off this yard. Because now that happened, my time is definitely up. I would have thought that Bam Bam would have went out maybe in a blaze of glory. He would have got a weapon himself and would have picked an influential target out there. You might as well, if you're gonna go out, you might as well go out, you might as well go out swinging. He should have got a weapon and whacked somebody else on that yard and got off that yard. But he didn't do that. And he continued to run that yard despite knowing that time was of the essence, that sooner or later they were going to figure it out and that they were going to come for him. And that's exactly what happened. So they sent another kite out to the yard, but this time it wasn't intercepted or redirected. Bam Bam had no idea that it even hit the yard. This time they sent it to Bebito from White Fence, so this time the kite ends up going to Bebito from White Fence, and they give him specific directives to have Bam Bam whacked. Whack him immediately, get him off the yard ASAP. So now these wheels are turning. Now, they're making plans to whack Bam Bam. And then at one point, Bebito, he approaches Shotgun about being a potential shooter to assist with whacking Bam Bam. He asked Shotgun, "Hey, you wanna assist with this? It's completely up to you. I already got my crew that are going with me. I got my shooters, but this is an opportunity for you to earn yourself a little bit of respect. If you want to go with us, I'll put you on. If not, you can stay back. It's completely up to you." And according to Shotgun, he opted to stay back. He opted not to be involved because the way he was looking at it was, this was a messy situation. The politics on this yard were messy, and he didn't want to take a chance of getting caught up in something that he didn't know nothing about. So, because it was an option, he decided to stay back. He said that if it would have been a directive, then he would have assisted. If they would have told him that, he would have been obligated to participate in that removal, then he would have participated. So the following day, everybody is out there on the yard. Bam Bam's out there, and he's got, his inner circle with him. He's got about 7 Sureños that are all from South Central, and these are his most loyal followers. These are the guys that make up his mesa, and the guys that roll with him, that still believe in what he's doing out there on the yard. So, he's walking the track with his crew out there. Bebito, he has about 7 or 8 guys from South Central that are with him. He's got his crew, and he's already starting to delegate his leadership, his mesa. He was already starting to select the individuals that he was going to have working with him. So the plan was to hit Bam Bam on the yard that same day. By then, everybody on the yard, all the Sureños out there, they all knew that Bam Bam had doctored that kite and that Blackie was hit because Bam Bam put his name on there. So there was a lot of individuals that were out there that were pissed off at Bam Bam. But like I said, he orchestrated a pretty slick move, but I thought he was smarter than that. I gave him too much credit because, again, he should have figured out an exit strategy, and he should have went out, by taking somebody else out instead of, sitting around waiting for them to take him out. But that's what he did. As soon as they came off lockdown, he should have made a beeline for his target, knowing that he didn't have too much time left on that yard. But that's not what he did. Instead, he goes out to the yard like a fat piece of tri-tip and allows himself to be surrounded by packs of hungry wolves. And that's exactly what they were. Everyone knew. All the different cars, LA, IE, they all knew, and they were all on board with it. So Bebito approaches Bam Bam and he tells him, "Hey, homie, let me get at you real quick." Now, if Bam Bam didn't feel any kind of threat on the yard at that time, if he didn't feel like, it was going to happen within the next day or two, when Bebito approached him and asked him if he could get at him about something, that's when Bam Bam should have known right there that, okay, this is it. That's when he should have took off on Bebito right there, as soon as he said that. But then again, I don't know what Bam Bam's thinking was. Maybe that dope had him all gouged out there, but he obviously wasn't thinking along the right lines. So when he approached Bam Bam and he told him that he wanted to get at him about something, Bam Bam, like I said, he was walking with around 7 Sureños from South Central. They all fell back and let Bebito and Bam Bam walk to the side, as well as the other Sureños that were with Bebito. They kind of fell back, but they were posted up. Those guys understood, or at least they anticipated that something was going to kick off. They knew that Bebito was going to hit Bam Bam, and they anticipated that Bam Bam would fight back, and that his 7 followers would go into effect, and that they would have his back. So when Bebito and Bam Bam walked to the side, these guys posted up, and they had their pieces. They were ready to take flight on these other guys. So as Bam Bam walked over to Bebito to see what he wanted, that's when Bebito spun around and he hits Bam Bam one time. He only got one good one in, and as soon as he hits Bam Bam, what happened next, nobody expected. As soon as Bebito plugged him that one time, Bam Bam turned around and ran towards the program office. He hit the burners, escape sticks went into full stride, and he took off like a bat out of hell. But that wasn't the only part of this that surprised everyone. When Bebito hit Bam Bam, his whole entourage, his inner circle, his bodyguards, or his most staunch supporters, whatever you want to call these guys, they made no attempt at coming to his aid. They just stood there. In fact, as soon as Bebito hit Bam Bam, Bebito's crew jumped up and advanced towards Bam Bam's crew. But they all shook their heads and backed up. Who knows? Maybe they understood that Bam Bam had that coming. Maybe they all understood that if they did engage, there were going to be some serious consequences for them as well. But at any rate, they backed up and they made it clear that they didn't want no problems and that they weren't going to back him up. I'm sure they had to have known that there would have been bad consequences for them all. But either way, that's exactly what they did. So after Bam Bam starts running towards the program office, everybody literally just sat there and watched him continue to run all the way to the program office. And, right before he walked into the program office, he turned over and looked at him one last time, and then he walked through the door. That's where, for those of you that don't know what the program office is, that's where all the clerks are at. That's where all the COs are at. Everybody from administration, those are the front offices. So basically, he ran to where all the COs were at. So the one thing that I will say about Bam Bam is that even though he took off running the way that he did, he still went out maintaining some measure of honor, because to everyone's surprise, he didn't tell on Bebito. He didn't tell them how he got hit, anything that was happening on the yard. He checked in. So from that point on, Bebito took over the yard, and he assigned his mesa, he assigned his inner circle. So from that point on, Bebito took over the yard. He appointed, his mesa, his inner circle, and he started to get that yard back up and on track. He started implementing policies, and everybody started programming out there the way that they were supposed to program. But Bebito moved a little too fast. He tried to do too much too fast, and eventually he ended up getting rolled up. Squad came out there, and they ended up rolling him up, taking him to the hole. The one thing that Shotgun said about that yard is that, it was always a yard where there was politicking going on against each other. Again, it was ground zero for LA County and Orange County Sureños to go at each other. But it seemed like there was always politicking going on against the different leaderships that would take that yard over. Somebody else would step up for a month and they get taken down. Somebody else would step up and take over the yard and they get rolled up and taken to the hole. So, there wasn't no period of time out there where somebody took that yard over and maintained that yard for, a while outside of Bam Bam from 41st Street. Once Bebito was gone, the yard was taken over by Stomper from 5th Street, who was working under Sana from F Troop. Then it went to Woody from Compton 7-0s. The thing that Shotgun said he learned from that yard was definitely the art of political power plays, political jostling, and the deceptive tactics Bam Bam had orchestrated. I hope you guys enjoyed this story right here. I appreciate you guys for tapping in. Drop your comments. We appreciate the support. All the new subs. This your boy B, and I'm out.